Hey everyone. So I've been planning on making this video for a while. The whole point sort of is to keep my friends and family updated on what's going on with my health, and I think that today I sort of felt like after feeling really shitty for the day and then reading a bunch of articles online and um, getting in touch with someone over email that I've been waiting for a while, I thought it would finally be a good time to connect with everyone. For those of you who don't know, I have Crohn's disease. I've had it since I was 13, so 2002. I was diagnosed just before grade 8, or I guess the September of grade 8, but had been sick for quite some time before that. And I've sort of struggled with it for however long that's been now. But I'll kind of go into that maybe later. I'm thinking of doing a bunch of different videos, keeping everyone sort of updated, but also going into some history about my health. I think that as I go through this next stage in my health, which I will talk about in a second, it's kind of interesting to be able to explain or describe what goes on in my daily life that affects me so much about Crohn's disease. Although a lot of you know that I have it, we're either removed enough that you don't see how it affects me on a daily basis, or there's parts of my life that you weren't a part of because of when we met or whatever. But essentially these videos are to keep you in touch with everyone. I know that it's sometimes a lot easier to know what's going on in someone's life through social media. I know that I keep in touch with a lot of you through social media or know what's going on with your lives because of that, and so now I'm going to use it as my platform. The big sort of news is that in August, I found out that I'm going to be having surgery in December. This is going to be my second surgery for my Crohn's. Again, it's another bowel resection. So they will take a part of my intestine out that's been affected or damaged right now, and I'll sort of talk about that later as well. I had my first surgery in 2009, and it was sort of explained to me that this will be something that I will most likely have to happen again because of the way that surgery works in your intestine. But you have 22 feet of your small intestine, so it's not like my body's really going to miss the next part that is taken out. The reason I sort of found out that or what led me to realizing I needed surgery was back in November of 2016, so almost a year ago. I suffered for about a month of these new crazy full body pains that sort of stemmed from my gut, but I didn't really realize could affect different areas of my body, specifically my chest and my heart, and it felt like these explosions that were happening. It only lasted the month of November, but I ended up going into the ER twice. Luckily, I already had a colonoscopy booked for that month. So in addition to the tests that were scheduled through my ER visits, I ended up having an ultrasound, an x-ray, and a colonoscopy all within a month. So back to back to back weeks. With that information, my doctor said, it's time to maybe increase your doses of medication. So I went from having my medication every 4 weeks to every 2 weeks. And it seemed for a while that was working. Things sort of leveled out, and I felt like I was able to handle the pain or just started going away completely. The medication increase seemed to be working, and that was it. I went about whatever, thought maybe it was just like a flare-up and this was going to be the solution. And then in March, all of these pains came back again. That led me to go back to the hospital, to the ER again, and they did another x-ray and basically said, well, you're feeling these pains because you're not going to the bathroom, which is insane because anyone that knows about Crohn's or has had a relative or friend or has experienced it themselves, whatever, knows that usually with Crohn's, you can't stop going to the bathroom. So it was like mind-boggling to understand that these new pains that were coming about were actually about me not being able to go to the bathroom, which I was sort of getting the hint because I wasn't going to the bathroom. And I was starting to look like I was close to 3 months pregnant with how bloated I was. My clothes weren't fitting me properly. All weird opposite things that I've experienced in the past when I've gone through a flare-up. I went back to my doctor and he said, let's get another ultrasound for you. So this was in March, and see what happens. I was really nervous because I had a trip planned during Easter and I just wanted to feel good for my trip. And I was nervous about being by the water and not being close to a bathroom and how that was all going to work out, being on a plane and like being sort of trapped in travel and transit. So I got really nervous about that, but luckily the pain started going away about a week before we left for our trip. And I felt like relieved that things were moving again. I went on my trip and everything was pretty good. I had a really rough time on the plane ride home because I was stuck in the middle seat for 5 hours without getting up and moving. My mistake. I really messed that one up. So when we got back, I could barely stand up straight. I was so bloated and in pain. And luckily, after a couple days of getting back into my routine and all of that, I ended up feeling much better. The ultrasound that I had before I left for my vacation ended up being like an hour long. Eventually I got the radiologist in, and he essentially said like, what we can see here but we can't really see because of the location is we are seeing fistulas. And I didn't understand what that was. I had never heard of it before. So obviously or naturally I went and started Googling it and got a little nervous, but he made sure to let me know that it was bowel to bowel fistula, which is, out of all the types of fistulas that you can have, is the best, although, it's all relative. So I went back to see my doctor in June, the first week of June, and he said, okay, with what we saw in all of your results of your tests from November and March, we need you to have an MRI. It's the only way that we're going to tell exactly what's going on. But by the looks of it, we're looking at surgery. Probably you'll have a little bit of leeway in when you can book it, but we won't know until you have the MRI how far along the issue is or how detailed the surgery needs to be, all of that stuff. But he said there's a really good chance that you'll have an appointment with a surgeon, which he had already referred me to, the surgeon that did my original surgery in 2009. There's such a hold on MRIs that it might be like 6 months before you have an MRI. So like, don't hold your breath, but we're going to try and get this all dealt with. I'm very lucky to have an amazing doctor. So the next day I get a call from my doctor's secretary and she says, Thursday you have an MRI booked. I'm like, oh, okay. That happened really quickly. Luckily they had just put in a new MRI machine at Mount Sinai just for the GI department. And I was lucky enough, as always with my disease and all of the stuff, to be a guinea pig test subject on the new machinery. So I was like, sure, and then looked at my calendar, realized it was graduation at school, which was very stressful to sort of coordinate all of this. My employer did not know about what was going on yet, although they were sort of aware that I was dealing with some stuff because I had to leave in March and November sort of really quickly to get to the emergency room. Again, my health getting in the way of me just living my life and being at work. The MRI took forever. I ended up passing out before I even got into the MRI machine, which super. But it seemed to go well, and I was booked to see the surgeon in a couple months. So just before I was leaving on another trip to San Diego, I had my appointment with my surgeon and basically explained that I have 2 fistulas building, which is basically a bridge between the walls of my intestine. So if your intestine does this curve right here, there are bridges building in the outside walls. So when you digest your food and it goes like this, now there's bacteria going up the opposite way, which is very bad. She said, we need to get you in for surgery sooner rather than later. I was kind of hoping and expecting that I would get to wait until the following summer to plan for surgery, but also made myself aware that it might happen in the winter. She wanted to do it in November, so fall, and I asked very politely if there was any way that I could push it until December, just so I could schedule it more so around work and taking time off, because my job is very important to me, and keeping routine and not letting that part of my health stress me out to the point where I really allow it to consume me was very important, because my last surgery literally took over my life to the point where I had to stop everything I was doing for 3 months, or probably more like 4 months, and I just couldn't handle that. I really suffered mentally from that experience, and I didn't want the same thing to happen to me this time. So I was lucky enough to be able to schedule it a little bit. I left the surgeon's office feeling calmer than I was expecting, which I think freaked my mom out a little bit, but mostly nervous to tell my boss finally what was going on. It wasn't the conversation I was necessarily expecting, although I know I am supported at my job. I think that explaining to two men what is going on with you internally that they cannot physically see has always been hard, whether it's these two men or men in general. Actually, not just men, most people in general. Same goes for mental health. I just so happen to experience a chronic illness that really is super internal. Unless I were to lose, let's say, 60 pounds all at once, which is what happened when I was diagnosed. So it's hard. It's hard for my parents. It's hard for my sister, who also has Crohn's. It's hard for my friends to understand what's going on. It's hard for me to explain it. I don't really like using my health as an excuse. So saying to someone, I'm having a bad day because my stomach is upset, or I've gone to the bathroom 3 times before lunch and I haven't even really eaten anything today. Like, it's a number one embarrassing disease to talk about, which it shouldn't be. Like, we all shit, so let's talk about it. It's hard to, it just sucks to complain about something all the time, and no one wants to complain. No one wants that negativity in their life. I am someone who's very adamant on keeping things positive and optimistic, because if I'm not, then that causes stress, and stress causes pain, and pain causes stress again, and it's just like this vicious circle in my life. I really try to sort of not keep it to myself in a like, I'm not going to talk to anybody about what's going on, because I do talk to several people in my life that I know I can talk to, especially my mom and my sister. And then I have a therapist that I can talk to who deals with chronic illness like this. And now I'm sort of talking to whoever's listening to these videos. So with that being said, I have created a new Instagram account called jessvscrohns, jessvscrohns. Obviously, these videos right now are too long to just keep on Instagram, so I will also share the YouTube link on that channel. So it's up to you. If you want to follow along with the next few months of what's going on with my health, and maybe afterwards as well, feel free to follow me on that new Instagram account that will link to a YouTube account as well, that I will post these videos. Really, it's just a way of me communicating with all of my family and closest friends. Thank you for spending this much time listening. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions about what's going on, feel free to comment or message me. If you want to talk about what's going on with your life too, I'm here to listen, because it's a two-way street and people should talk about their feelings more. And that is all. Good night.